So we have news tonight about the state of play between the United States and Iran, but there is also this mystery surrounding the latest airstrikes. See, no one has claimed responsibility today for the airstrikes that hit Iran after the U.S. announced it had finished its attacks. Raises the obvious question, who else may be targeting Iran? The Gulf nations that Iran has repeatedly targeted since the war began, they didn't comment on the strikes. Israel hasn't claimed any recent attacks on Iran. And this has happened as the country was preparing to bury the former Ayatollah who was killed at the beginning of the war. Now, the big picture? This week's resumption of back-and-forth strikes came as President Trump reiterated that the interim ceasefire deal is over. Posted on social media, quote, "The Islamic Republic of Iran has asked us to continue talks. We have agreed to do so, but the United States has stated to them in no uncertain terms that the ceasefire is over." And tonight, senior U.S. officials saying the Trump administration is demanding Iran make a public statement that the Strait of Hormuz is open and that ships won't be attacked. So there's a lot to sort out here, too. Joining me, retired Marine Corps intelligence officer Hal Kempfer. Good to see you, Hal. Thanks so much. Where do you think these unclaimed airstrikes came from? And one of the things I wondered, is it anyone internally in Iran?
Jesse, it is a mystery. I will say that. But I will say something else, that probably the most likely source is the Gulf states. All right. And the reason I say that is because Iran afterwards pointed out the UAE in specific, saying supporting U.S. military efforts. I found that to be a rather interesting comment. Now, there have been multiple reports that Israel has offered to join in on the strikes, these latest strikes. The reports also said that the U.S. asked Israel not to join in on this. But you have to remember that part of Iran's recent retaliation was to hit the Gulf states. So it's most likely the Gulf states.
I mean,
we don't know.
Iran launched strikes against Bahrain, Jordan, Kuwait, Qatar, all in response. I got to go now to what's happening with the ceasefire. You know, the president says the ceasefire is over. Both sides keep striking each other, but yet there is this emphasis, let's still have the talks go. I'm not really sure I understand what the end game is. Is this a situation where, you know, it's a bombing them in submission? Because I'm trying to understand if that's going to make a change. And then I'm also wondering, is there just extreme division in Iran where you might not actually get a deal?
Jesse, all those things are very possible. Actually, there's a lot of reports of divisions. One of the frustrations that the White House has pointed out is we seem to have an agreement at the table, and then as soon as they walk away from the negotiating table, they go back to Tehran and they do the exact opposite of what they just agreed to, specifically with the Strait of Hormuz. Now, right now, we're not in a ceasefire. I don't know how much clearer that could have been. You know, there was some question on that, but it's pretty clear we're not in a ceasefire. We are definitely in what's called a lull. It's not active kinetics as of this moment. That could change tonight or tomorrow. I don't know, but right now it's a lull. There is some discussion that there's some progress with the Iranians, that they may publicly state that they will not stop shipping going through the strait. I don't know. I think that's just part of the solution.
Is there anything we can do? Is there anything the U.S. military could do to keep the Strait of Hormuz open?
Oh, yeah. There's a lot we could do. Obviously, you've seen the airstrikes and things like that. But also, we hit Kark Island.
Yeah.
There's forces in there. We have a Marine Expeditionary Unit there. We have, I think we still have a brigade of 82nd Airborne there. If we wanted to take an island, we do have the means to do that. We could put boots on the ground. That's a political decision.
I got to ask you about this. Look, you were an intel officer. I got to ask you about Iran's alleged assassination plot against President Trump. Trump told the New York Post that he's, quote, left instructions, if anything happens, to just literally bomb them at levels they've never even seen before. And he also reported to the New York Post that Iran had him on a kill list for a long time, but seemed to also suggest that Israel didn't provide any kind of new intel. I'm confused as the back and forth. A, do you believe that Israel had intel, legitimate intel that they shared with the United States regarding a potential plot against the president? I'm curious if he would even admit that. But also, I think it goes to a larger issue. If true, people say, why do we need Israel? For this very reason. But two, do you think it's legitimate from Israel? And two, what do you make of the instructions from the president if something should happen to him? What would happen to Iran?
Well, Israel has some of the best intelligence sources on Iran anywhere. I mean, they have been focused on that one target set forever. So It's more likely true than not true that what the Wall Street Journal reported about there's a threat that was aimed at President Trump. You saw the switch that took place with the Air Force Ones. I don't think that was accidental. I think they wanted the Air Force One that had more defensive features on it, and I think that was tied directly to it. Now, is it untrue that President Trump has been on a kill list by them? I think that's very true. In fact, it's always been assumed, not just him, but other members of his first term administration have been on a kill list by him for quite some time. So yes, that's true, and I really think, that's all very possible in terms of that.
And the instructions are pretty clear. I have a feeling that's true too. All right, Hal Kempfer, conversation for another day. Thank you so much for taking the time. Have a great weekend.
All right, you too, Jesse.